Thank
She
you.
is joining us today. I met Max in the Tony Robbins world, another one from the Tony Robbins world, and we met literally in December, just a
We
few months
did.
ago.
I know. Seems like such a long time ago.
Right? We hit it right away immediately. We were on Slack talking to each other, and I believe, well, I kind of saw you were Asian, which is kind of rare in the community already. In kind of the more advanced leadership track, so that was even more rare for me to see Asian
Yes,
in the community as well. And then we started talking about BTS.
that's right. Susanna and I are BTS Army.
So whoever army's listening to this is your show. Purple Heart.
Purple Heart.
Oh, I think that's what you were saying. You were on a journey. You were on a tour with the BTS.
Well, yes, one of the members toured last year, and it actually coincided with the day that my departure from my company. It happened that day. They had to announce my departure. They announced it around, I think, 5 o'clock, and I think I left and got immediately on an airplane and flew to Chicago, where I met a friend. I landed around midnight. We slept on the street because I had general admission tickets on the sidewalk in the grass next to a Target, and the stadium was on the other side. And we barricaded, which, if you guys don't know what that means, it means you got front row because we spent the night. So, like, how can you not get front row? I had the best time of my life, and I
Which
saw him.
member
I
was
saw
it?
him 9 times. So, hardcore. I'm hardcore. I wish I could have seen more, but I also was transitioning. I'm sure we'll talk about this. I was transitioning from kind of a work style that I've been doing for many, many years, like decades. And I really didn't know what I was going to do next. I just knew I was exhausted and it had been very toxic for me. And so I needed a distraction. So for me, music, traveling, I traveled a lot. And then I traveled, it was during the summer, so I also traveled with my family. So I needed to distract myself from what I had just left.
Is that how you discovered BTS? Or how
No,
long have you been in Army?
2019. Are we really going to talk about this topic? This is amazing.
I love it.
2019. And for people who don't know BTS or they have a lot of assumptions about them, I think you'll hear a lot of stories about it's the song lyrics and how much meaning they have. And so when you're in a state where you're like you're seeking for something, something is not right in your life, but you might not know what it is. Music gives you comfort. And for me, it was BTS. I think they're extremely entertaining and visually very dynamic, but then you have to learn their music because it's sung in Korean with a few words in English. And so then you go and try to figure out what the translations are, and you're like, oh my God, these songs are really deep and powerful. And the person that I followed, Suga, he actually talks a lot about staying true to yourself. And his music is both really about being who he is and also like giving the finger to the people who were talking crap about him, who didn't believe that he could do it. And he was very poor when he was younger. And he had like these really big dreams about not being in that state anymore, not being in that environment. It's amazing to follow his story 12 years later to see kind of how successful he is. And his concert, at the very last concert, which I happened to be at in Seoul, he basically closed the chapter. And when he looks back, I think he is surprised himself how far he's gone. But he is truly who he is as a 30 something year old person. And it will be amazing to watch kind of how people like that, who are so wise to being true to who you are in their 30s, like what's going to happen to him in the future? Because I'm only coming to this, well, not in my 30s. Why don't we say that? I'm not in my 30s, so I'm coming to it later in life, but it's better now than to be in your 60s and 70s and look back and go, wow, what was I doing?
That's beautifully said because oftentimes we think about oh, I'm too old, or I'm too old to do that, I'm too old to play, or
Yeah,
maybe I'm hallucinating, I'm too old to even follow BTS, right? There
yeah.
could be some sort of
I
a
get
stigma
that.
like that,
I get that a
right?
lot. I get that a lot.
Yeah.
And
But it's about mhm.
it's about being joyful.
Yes.
So if that gives me joy, well,
Yeah.
why do I've learned literally from Sugar, If I'm doing what I love, what's it to you? And he had a lot of people talking, like early rappers in Seoul did not approve of him because he ended up deciding to be an idol, right? So you went from a hardcore rapper in Seoul, Korea, whatever the underground movement back then, and then you're going to be an idol, you get made fun of. And so I'm like, I collect stuffed animals. Like I have little things all over, and I think you just have to have joy.
Love
You
that.
know, this is a little thing that I do. This is like a craft.
Wow.
So like I do a lot of things that I think younger people do, but that's kind of who I am. So I think it gives me a lot of joy and energy and happiness to do those things.
And I think that's probably why I connected to your energy so much. Even though I can't remember if we must have seen each other on the Zoom.
Yes,
And
I'm sure. We're like,
yeah,
oh, yes, there's the other
yeah,
Asian woman.
exactly, exactly. And it's like you're exuding of that joy, even that connected me to you over the screen. And
Mm.
it's like you have such a youthful heart. So I just love you for that.
Oh, thank you. I also think that when you're in like a Tony event, and if you're able, like I've been to many Tony events, it's been a journey for me. I did my first one in 2012. And the work to be joyful doesn't come easy for me. Like we were just talking about this right before we went live and or in this recording, and it feels so good. Like it feels so good right now to be talking to you because we're talking about a topic that like we have found a little bit of joy ourselves. So how can we help other people find it? But I could say that like you were asking me about December and it was kind of a tough month. It's because there's certain times in your life where you're transitioning and everything feels like it doesn't feel like it's going to click. And you can get into the state, and I kind of allow myself to be in that state for a little bit. Like I give myself a limited amount of time, but it's not always like I'm not always like this, but it feels so good to be like this.
Yes. Jump right into your story. So
Yeah.
what were you doing before, and what are you doing now?
So I have been in the video game industry for like 22 or 23 years. What I do is I'm a producer, I'm a game producer. So, what that means is with any creative endeavor, especially a game, there's a lot of people it takes to make a game. You have designers, you have character artists, you have 3D artists, you have animators, you have people who create sound. If the characters speak, you have people who record all that. You have tons of engineers. So they need people who are going to organize all the work that needs to get done. So my work is sometimes project manager, sometimes I would say the cat herder, but I'm also there to I help the process flow better. So operations is actually what I do right now. So if there's a creative endeavor, I'm the one who comes in to organize it so it actually happens. So that's kind of what I do. And my very first game was The Sims. Probably a lot of people who've played the game The Sims. And then I went to another company that made Facebook games and also mobile games. And then I recently was at a really big company called Riot Games that makes League of Legends and Valorant. So a lot of people may know about that. So I've had a long career doing that. So last year I left. I don't think I knew what I was going to do. I don't know if a lot of your audience will resonate with this. I just was not very happy. Things were very stressful. And I think in Western society, and actually in a lot of societies, we think that stressing like that is normal, that it is a normal part of life to be that stressed. I think stress is a part of life, but there is chronic stress that we accept as normal that is not normal. It makes you really sick. It really can pull the joy out of your life. And I was in that state and I was trying really hard to make it work because I don't like to leave. I like to stick it out. But there was a variety of things that were giving me clues that this was not right. And I actually don't know if I would have made the decision by myself, but I had a new manager. And the new manager was high empathy. And she was talking to me and she thought, Max, you should think about leaving. And there was a number of things that happened. She also actually left the company, so I think she felt comfortable saying this. But we started to have a conversation, and I had known her for years, but we had not worked together, and she had freshly just became my manager. And I think she was just like, I'm seeing the truth, and she was seeing the truth for herself. I don't want to demonize any particular company, but you have to make your own decision. If you are really in a place where you're suffering from chronic stress, you're having panic attacks, which I think I would say I had a few, or things are just not right, sometimes it's okay to step out. In fact, I would prescribe thinking at least about not continue to just push, 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 but consider stepping out.
Walk us through the process of how you did that. You had the manager, and how did you decide, okay, this is the
I,
time for me?
I think I knew 2 years before that I wanted to leave and that I was not working on things that part of it has to be with, do you know what kind of work you want to be doing? That's one. The other one is the environment that you're in. Does it have the same values that you value? And so this is why it's not useful to demonize a company. A company is just a company. It's trying to do what it needs to do. Like a company has its own purpose, its own vision. You have to decide whether that fits for you or not. So I'm not here to say like you should quit any job. Actually, I have a lot of friends and I'm not opposed to joining another company, but it has to feel like I click in and that they see me and I see them. So I think 2 years ago, prior to that, I already kind of knew that this wasn't the right company for me anymore. But you feel like you have all these responsibilities you don't want to leave. And you're trying to really make it work. But I think the other thing that made me want to stay was when you're in a position and you feel like you're not enthused about it, you're not doing your best work. And I think that, or admittedly, I think that starts to seep into your work. You're not excited about it. If you have a team that reports into you, you could hide it as much as you can, but they can feel the difference between the energy that I have with you today and me showing up in a job that I'm like, not quite sure I want to do. People are like, what is she doing over there? Because I also got myself in a position where I really love working with teams. So the job I had a team, but it was actually a little bit above the fray, so above the teams. And I get a little bit, I'm not going to say bored. I will say I love the feedback loop of being in a team. When you're up here and you're in a central role, meaning what you're doing affects many teams, it's not the same kind of energy that I get from it. So I could tell that I was not enthused, and the company itself was questioning whether or not what I was doing was valuable. So there were all these clues. It's like the universe is trying to squeeze you out, and you don't pay attention. It just starts to squeeze a little harder to get you out of there because you're ready for your next thing. So I think sometimes I don't want to leave. Why? Because, okay, there's the stability issue, of course, but I think the other thing is like you're not ready to change your identity from what you're doing to something else. And you're
Yeah.
scared. You're like, maybe it's just better to stick it out over here, even though I'm really unhappy, or the company and you can tell maybe it's not the right relationship anymore. So I think my process was I kind of knew it. It was getting worse and worse and worse. And I won't go into the details. And then my new boss came in who I had known. And I think she just said out loud something that I had been thinking about. And I think if I didn't hear her then, I think something even more critical would have happened. I can't even say I was processing through it. I think the process forced me to leave that situation.
You're so right. It remind me of somebody once told me when the universe wants us to step into our next level, it will give you all these sorts of signals in the beginning. It's always quite mild
Yes.
until if you don't hear it, it's gonna give you a little bit harder nudge
Yep. A
and
little
harder
louder.
nudge. Exactly.
Yes.
Until it became so painful
Yeah.
that you cannot ignore it anymore.
Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of people have to hit rock bottom before they change. Not everybody, but a lot of us have to hit that rock bottom.
Yeah.
But it is a gift. That rock
Yeah.
bottom is a gift. Anybody who's hit rock bottom and gotten to the next level can look back and say, I know why that happened. We
Yeah.
all have stories like that in our lives.
Yeah. It's so true. And you touched on a really good point earlier. You said the piece of identity. I
Mm,
had that issue of identity when I was still in my engineering job, and I identified myself as an engineer. And I had this crazy moment where it's like, oh, what if I left this place and I'm not an engineer anymore? Like, who am I? Did you
hmm
have something similar?
Okay, I think a couple of things. I think that there's two levels of identity, or maybe there's just one, and I sometimes confuse the two. But the identity is we are here on Earth. We're so lucky to be alive, right? Like the odds of any one of us making it through the whole sperm and egg situation and being here and alive is a gift. I think we go through our lives actually, if we are lucky, to understand we're here to just be our true selves. Just like a tree is a tree, a rose is a rose, a tulip is a tulip, a bird is a bird, we are who we are. And so you suffer when you try to be someone who you're not. And growing up in an Asian background, there's all these expectations, spoken and unspoken. My daughter even does that. She watches these YouTube channels, and I'm sure you've heard of a guy named Uncle Roger. I don't know if you know who he is, but she quotes him all the time. She'll walk around saying, bees make honey, A's make money. And so already, even though she's joking, she's already thinking, I'm Asian, I need to get an A. And if I don't get an A, I'm not a good Asian. So these are the things, these are the stories that have been told to us. Okay, so we're Asian, so we have our variety of early childhood stories. All kind of cultures have their stories, right? So as a youngster, we kind of absorb at a certain age, we're not ourselves anymore. We start to pay attention to the outside environment and we start to think that that's what makes good. So in a previous career, I was an attorney. So just like you, I was a lawyer, just like you're an engineer. I actually am grateful that I have the wisdom to know when I'm doing something that I don't love, I stop. So after a year of practicing law, I left. But why did I go to law school? Because I felt like I needed some letters behind my name. I wasn't going to be an MD, I wasn't going to be a CPA. So I'm like, I'm going to get the JD behind there. So I think that identity is kind of stolen from us. And those of us who are lucky become aware that that's not who we are. Now, I'm really slow because it took me a really long time to understand that's not who we are. But when I left law and I went into tech, the same expectation I had of myself stuck. So even though I did change careers, so I didn't do something I wasn't happy with, I still expected myself to be extremely successful and to have other letters, head of, VP, senior, whatever, all those adjectives and that we chase after. So I think that identity is not who I am. But it feels really painful to leave that identity because that identity also made me very successful at what I do and gave me financial success. So it is really scary at this time to leave that identity behind. But I know that my identity is some of that is my identity. The external measurement is not me. The titles are not me. The amount of money I make is not me. Being in a particular company, if you look at the companies I've been in, they're all really big because I like to associate myself with big names. If I can get in the big company, it means I'm valuable. That is also not me. And if you keep believing that that's you, you will hit rock bottom. One day you're going to wake up and you're like, okay, I have the house, I have the car, I have the fancy stuff. Why am I so miserable? Right? Because when you break with your true identity, at some point, your true soul inside yourself is like, I've had enough of that. So then you end up going to Tony Robbins events and go like, what the heck's wrong with my life? And then you realize that the true person inside is who you really are. And actually, if you give that a chance, which is where I am right now, if you give it a chance and have that sit on top of the foundation of everything you've learned, I truly believe you will be more abundant than you've ever been. And the abundance takes many forms, as you know, Suzanne. Sometimes it's financial, and sometimes it is joy and health. We have nothing if we're not healthy. We have nothing. I was sick 2 weeks ago in my bed. I was like, this is the worst. You can't do anything. You can't go outside. You can't have fun. You can't talk on the phone.
I want to go back a little bit. You said the identity piece is so huge for me. And Tony Robbins, I'm quoting Tony Robbins, the strongest human force is for us to be consistent with the identity of ourselves, right?
Mm.
And I'm paraphrasing here. And how did you find out that you are not your title behind your name? You're not those letters. You're not the big company name. How did you discover that for yourself?
Oh, that's such a good question. I've never thought about it that way, but I will tell you when I was younger, I remember thinking if people knew I was an attorney, they'd be so impressed by me. So conversations I would have is like, so what do you do? Or so what do you do? And that's just a natural part of like socializing with people. But it always felt to me a little like a letdown afterwards because then you're comparing yourself with other people. That's like, is my identity a lawyer? Is my identity some person at some big game company? And in fact, it feels a little, even a little shallow when you have that awareness of what it is to truly connect to people and what it feels like to shallowly connect with people. When there are younger generations that find out where I work, they become extremely interested in talking to me because of what I do. But the conversations are pretty superficial and they're very like they're so impressed with my background and what I do, but there's no true connection there except that, oh my God, can you get me stuff from your company? When people know nothing about me, and like I think at Tony, I don't think a lot of us talk about what we do. It comes out every once in a while, but none of us actually talk about what we do. And yet we build the strongest connections because we're going soul to soul, heart to heart, mind to mind. And you could feel it, how good that feels. And so, as awful as this sounds to me right now, I've told my husband to follow my dreams, I will give up this house that I'm in. And I'm in a pretty nice house. I will give this up and live with my mom. My mom is at my house right now because it's Chinese New Year. And I've told her, I said, if this doesn't work out and I can't afford to pay my mortgage, I'm going to move to your house. She was so happy. Do you know how happy Asian parents are when you say I'm going to move back?
My mom asked me to move back all the
All
time
the
when I'm
time.
married.
Actually, I asked my mom to move in with me. She's like, oh my God, so boring at your house. So I think the way I know it is because it feels so good to talk about real things, to really connect with people, to talk about how to be truer or to bring it back to the BTS community. I think BTS Army instantly connect with each other because we have something in common. And then actually even in that community there are people who are kind of superficial like, "Oh, how many likes do you have?" or like, "How many concerts have you gone?" But in that you actually can find real friendships past the superficiality of the BTS Army. You will find true connections. And video games are the same way. People who played video games even earlier on, decades ago, they didn't have a community. They were the nerds, they were the dorky people, the people that didn't have a lot of friends. But when they started playing games together, especially online games with each other, you start to build real friendships with people you play games with. And just because when you're sitting around going through a quest or whatever, you start talking about like stuff. Oh, so what did you, oh my God, my mom is like such a, she's so mean to me. Like you just start to connect to each other. And so it feels so good in your body. That's who you really are. When you're doing things that feel like time flies, that's who you really are. That's the stuff that you were meant to do in this world.
It's so true. It's that definition of when you do something you love, you don't think about the time, and time
Yeah.
just flies by so much. It's like, just like playing video games, or for Army, listening to BTS videos, and I did
Yeah.
that all the time, right? And versus, and I like to compare that contrast for myself. It's like when I go to work, thinking about when I used to step into the office, that dragging those heavy feet, that is completely not how it should feel like when I like
Yeah.
something, when I love something,
Yeah.
right?
I think the hardest thing is all of us know we're not happy or something's not right, but it's just so scary to take that next step. You have to really take a leap of faith to do that. I think that is where a lot of people get stuck. And I think maybe because I hit rock bottom, but I am kind of one of these people who only have a certain tolerance for unhappiness. And I always think, because I didn't know what I wanted to do next, but I remember when I switched my career from being an attorney and I went actually into a web startup, I think I cut my income by half. And I just thought, well, I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want. And that's good enough for me. It's good enough for me to leave what I don't want. And in the course of doing that, kind of look back and go, well, what did I learn from that? Okay, I think I learned that I became a lawyer for the wrong reasons. And I find out that I didn't really want to do it. And everything, it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake to spend tens of thousands of dollars in law school and then not use your degree. It's not a mistake. You learn from every single mistake you ever make.
The moments that you heard, hey, this is not for me, whether from your attorney life to the web company or in your video gaming world, what was that thought process? Okay, I'm gonna take that leap of faith.
I don't really go through a thought process. I'm going to tell you the truth, Suzanne. The part of me that wants stability and security does not want to leave the job that pays me and pays for my medical. I don't want to go. I only go because you're now comparing your own mental health and your happiness and joy, and you know who you are. If you stepped outside of yourself and you looked at yourself, you're like, is this how you want to live? So my thought process is, I guess, mass just looking at myself and going like, WTF? Get yourself off the ground. What are you doing? It's literally me yelling at myself or me crying. The process is not pretty. If any of you guys out there is like crying in the corner, like in a state of despair, you're doing it right. It feels a little like that. I mean, I didn't have another job. I just knew that I couldn't do that anymore, and it wasn't the right place for me. It's a right place for so many people. It's a right place for so it just wasn't right for me. So then the next thought was, I would say give yourself some time to detox, to get healthy again. And that took me a long time. Now, I have to say that I am lucky because some people financially cannot just stop working. In that case, you have to at least recognize the situation that you're in. And if you can take even a little bit of time off and get away from it and find a support network that will help you, I think you really need to do that. The gaming industry right now is suffering from massive layoffs. Like the company that I was with just laid off over 500 people, and Activision Blizzard just laid off 1,900 people. And almost every week I'm hearing of layoffs. And I always tell those people that is a very traumatic situation. You need to give yourself time to repair. You need to give yourself time to repair. So I would say once you've made the decision to leave or the decision was made for you, take the time to rest and really take care of yourself. And then I think my next process is sit down and think about all the things. I've done coaching before, and I always tell people get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and by yourself for a couple of hours and write down everything that you love doing. The rule is you must not use the word but. You can't write something down and go, but that's so silly, but that's so whatever. Because you got to get back in touch with what you really love about life. But if you can, I would not do that until you had some time detoxing. Because if you were exited out, the pain of being exited out and that rejection is really painful for most people. And you got to give yourself time. And then I think if you can, I think you need to find either a support network and if you can, a coach to actually move because it is a really big change to go from one direction to another. If you decide to go into another company, then I think you should at least give yourself some time and then think about what what you loved and did not love about your last company and be very specific and disciplined about what you want. Kind of like when you were young, you want to make a list about your perfect husband, your perfect spouse. You had that ridiculous list. You need to make a ridiculous list about your next work environment.
It's so true. Oftentimes, and you touch on this at the beginning as well, the Western society at least, we think we should be busy. People take pride from being busy. I often see so many people say, "Oh, how was your day?" "Oh my God, it was so
So
busy."
busy.
But they feel proud about it.
Yeah.
It's feeling the busyness,
Yeah.
right? And that stress that comes along with it, the byproduct that comes along with it. And you touch on, we need to recover from that because we get so much into the routine of feeling busy and that stress that we don't realize that, like you said, is not normal for us to do that.
Yeah. It's going to
So we need
burn
to
you
take that
out.
time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would say kind of a sickness in our society. I remember that too. Like you say it with pride. Oh, I'm so busy. Or if you're a lawyer and you're like a first year, second year lawyer, it's almost your disgusted and proud at the same time that you worked on a brief till like 2 o'clock in the morning and then you had to get up at 7 to go attend a meeting. I mean, it's almost like we're proud of that. I mean, I totally get it. It's all your ego. It's your ego talking about like how hard you're working. And many of us know that, I'm in the middle of my life. That will definitely burn you out. And I wish I could say that I was smarter, that I didn't burn out, that I had learned from other people, but I didn't. And I'll tell you right now, it burns you out. And I think that's why people who are older are wiser because they go through this life. And if you're, again, lucky, you learn from it. And if you're not, you become a grouchy old person that hates everyone. I don't want to be that. I do not want to be that.
Talk a little bit more because I feel like sometimes we're in a burnout, but we don't
Yeah.
even realize we're in one. Can you talk us a little bit, kind of what kind of symptoms could be a burnout? Not from the Google sense, because I'm sure many of us have Googled it, but emotionally, what does it feel like?
So it is true that when you are in burnout, you do not know you're in burnout. I will tell you in my family, what I started to do was push my family away. I would say, I'm really busy. I need to do this. And I was realizing it was taking me longer to do the work that it would take me much shorter a year ago or whatever ago when you were more excited. So when you start to push loved ones away, I think you're just trying to do your work and you could tell it's taking you longer and longer. I think the way to contrast it is, so I took 6 months off. That's how long I decided to take before I went back into the into the work world. I still have residual emotions from it, and it feels like fear and it feels like darkness. It does not feel good. For me, the way it feels like is I am not good enough. I'm not good enough and I couldn't make it work. In my days that I'm not feeling that way, I could tell that life does not feel that dark. Life should not feel like you're constantly saying, I'm not good enough, or you're constantly saying, life, it's not normal, whether you believe in God or the universe or whatever religion or spirituality you are. We are meant to be bright and happy and content with our life. And I know happy is a kind of a vague word. It feels good to be in your body. When you are burnt out, it does not feel good. You don't feel good. You feel mentally heavy and you feel sick. And if you tell yourself, oh no, I'm just sick, oh no, I'm just really busy right now, but you start to notice that you're pushing your family away or you want to be alone more or you're in a dark place a lot, you wake up in a dark place, that's when you know you're burnt out because that's not normal.
So contrasting that, how do you feel right now after 6 months?
Well, it's gone up and down, I would say, because I am not an amazingly evolved human being. I still have a lot of these old stories that pull me back. The scariest thing for me was finances. And that's only because I didn't grow up with a lot of money, so it's a fear for me to not have it. I've actually worked a lot on that mindset because that mindset will keep you in that state. So as I'm doing it, I'm having more really great days. I also surround myself with people who are go-getters and positive. Like people like you, like when you post things, it's always so positive. And I really love that because you want to be with a community that is what you want to be. I have a couple of friends that we're always talking about because we're all kind of in the same state where we're not working, we're trying to figure out the next thing, but we're really positive and we're always supporting each other. And what it feels like is you're looking into the future. You're in your present. If I'm feeling really bad, I think about, well, what can I do right now? What is the thing that I could do right now? And if I'm going to be like a whiner about it, I give myself a time to whine. Sometimes it could be days, which is really bad. But I always figure out what can I do right now? So I keep a journal. And when you do that one thing that you can do, you start to build momentum to the next thing that you can do. And so lately I've been feeling pretty good. And I think that when you put that out into the environment, it comes back to you. So more recently, I don't know what's happening, but people are starting to reach out to me more for job opportunities. And it all just happened this month, like in February. In 9 days, something happened. And that's because I spent time in January doing all the things to get out of the crummy mood that I was in November. So I feel increasingly better.
So, what are the things that you do for yourself? You mentioned journaling. Is there any other stuff that you do for yourself to get to this point where you were able to raise your own vibration that way?
Okay, the thing I do, and I think this is has to do with knowing who you are. When I am not watching my mind, like the dialogue that goes in my head is like just a lot of self criticism. Oh, you didn't exercise enough today, or those pants feel tighter, or oh, you shouldn't have eat that bread. You procrastinated this morning, you shouldn't have. The number of negative things that is going in my head when I don't watch it. So the thing that I do that helps me the most is I stop and thank myself. And if you guys don't know Mel Robbins, you need to listen to Mel Robbins podcast because she just did one. She's like, and I don't know, I didn't watch this live, but there's a woman named Nisi, and I'm so sorry that I don't know who this is because I don't watch a lot of TV except for Korean dramas. I don't know who this is, but she seems to have been somebody who had been nominated for the Emmys for really like a lot of times, and she finally won. And she went on stage and thanked herself. Everybody should go and watch this. You need to thank yourself. If you are listening to this podcast, it's because there's something in you that wants your life to be better than what it is now. So you need to thank yourself because not that this is about comparison, but you don't have to do that. You can sit and be like, I'm just going to be unhappy, or I'm just going to be this, or I'm just going to be that. But you're here and you want to do better. So you need to thank yourself. So, like, when I think about it, I'm like, I actually thank myself for being such a hard worker. I thank myself for standing up to people who didn't believe in me. I thank myself for going to Tony Robbins, even though people make fun of me when I tell them I go to Tony Robbins. I thank myself for quitting my job and traveling around the United States to go to concerts because it made me so happy. And that's what I needed for myself. It was a distraction. I didn't deal with the real issues underlying, but it was a really good time. And so I think spending time thanking myself, like I already feel so much better because how did you get this far? You did it. I did it. You did it. You stopped being an engineer and started doing something else because you were brave enough to do that. And we can all find things in our lives to thank ourselves for. So I would say do that. Stop being down on yourself. It doesn't work. Like if you said the things to yourself you did to your child, that child would be like in therapy by the age of 11. Don't do that.
That's so true, and it's like the old version, the old version of us being corporate, we would have judged it as like, oh, why did you take that route, or the why did you spend that time there? But it's like if it weren't for that self who were so unhappy at that place, we wouldn't have been able to even feel this kind of contrast that we do now,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
burnout to recovered.
Yeah. That's right. The contrast in life is so important. We are in a series of growth cycles in our life. Like, I feel like in my life, every 7 to 10 years, I have a very big transition. And this I can tell is one of them. And I can look back and know that every single transition I've had has taken all my learnings from the previous one. It's not that it's like this bright thing that happens. It's like what Tony says, we go in seasons, right? And so I think last year was the winter of that season, that professional career. And now I'm in a different season. And I might still go back to a company, but I have very strict rules about myself. So I am a natural organizer, but I'm high empathy. So I cannot go in a company that thinks that somebody like me is too nice. It's nice to be nice, but I do my work. So I'm kind of a yin yang kind of person. Like I have a soft skill and hard skills, and I need to go to a company that recognizes both are important. If I'm going to go into a company, it has to be very spiritually aware. And when I say this to people, people tell me that companies like this don't exist. Then I say, then I will be the one to help create it.
Yes. And I can tell you absolutely they do exist. Right now I have a small team, but every day, after every single day, we share with each other what our wins are from the day.
Mm,
Even just having made a small call, a small conversation, having persuaded the person or influenced that person to make something different for themselves, we celebrate those small wins for ourselves.
yeah.
And I can absolutely tell you those companies exist because I didn't create this company culture from nowhere. I got inspired from other companies. Tony Robbins' company is definitely one of
Yes.
them,
Yes. So I'm
and he has a
so happy
huge
to
team.
hear that because I think the coming decade has to see change in the corporate environment. Companies like this cannot exist because it people some people can actually thrive in a like a company of I would say of the past, but a lot of us don't love it. Like we do it because we have to make a living. My God, imagine what it could be like if we were all lit up and we all had managers, or maybe we stop calling them managers, we call them something else, where my job is to actually unlock you. My job is to actually know who you are and know what you're great at and know what you're maybe not so good at. Maybe I don't put you on those jobs, or I help you get past those blocks that you want to get past. At the same time, I'm holding standards that are very high, and we kind of just all learn together. Imagine how wonderful that would be, and how much more productive, and the beautiful products and the beautiful services that we would provide. It's a whole different
Yeah,
world, and I really do believe that that's is happening right now.
absolutely. When we're in that, or as a team, when we're in that high vibrating state, and as a team, we basically are collaborating, we are serving each other as a team, and when we can get to that state together, like we're gonna elevate each other so much more beyond what we can even imagine what we're capable of doing by ourselves alone.
Yeah, yeah. The other
Yeah.
thing too is I think that's going to be great for the work that we're doing is a lot more companies are they're remote, and people are social animals. I think for us to be leaders with high empathy, it makes the work of connecting through a screen more possible. Because when I have a meeting with someone, I'm listening to what they're saying, but I'm also trying to pick up on how are they responding to what I'm saying, and really trying to get them to understand I'm really interested in what you're saying. So please tell me more so that you don't feel like you're sitting alone in your kitchen table by yourself and you don't think anybody understands what you're going through.
So Max, I always finish all my podcasts with this one question.
Okay?
Somebody is sitting in their kitchen and they hear this nudge of, I want something more. This life that I'm living right now, I feel like something's missing. What's one recommendation that you would give them?
You have to listen. Your life literally depends on it because that is your gut instinct telling you there's more in life. You don't stop. You just keep listening. You do not listen. You have to listen. Write it down. Do whatever it takes because that is literally the universe or God poking you with a toothpick, and you must listen. Do not, under any circumstances, ignore it.
100% agree. And if you ignore it, it will never go away. It will just come back in different forms.
You're going to be really late in life and wish you had listened. I was just listening to another podcast this morning, and it was another Mel Robbins one, and it was someone who was very successful. And he said, not changing, not getting out of your unhappy career to do something else is actually a much bigger risk in life. You think it's a risk to leave, it's actually a bigger risk to stay when you think about your life and how you want to live it. We got to think much bigger about what we want. And I know we hear this a lot about it's not about the money, it's not about this, it's not about that. As someone who has gone from being like growing up middle class to now being having a lot of luxuries in my life, I will tell you the money does not make you happy. If you're not on your path to be yourself, it actually distracts you and makes things actually a lot worse and more confusing. So you really need to listen to that little voice inside of you.
Thank you so much, Max, for joining us. You gave us so many golden nuggets, and you gave us even exercise, to prepare and journal of what we really love to do. And so I really hope that you guys still definitely take the time to do that because once we can identify that, then you have the direction for yourself. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Max, for sharing your knowledge with us today.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
See you guys next time.